So let's talk about that for a second. Let's address that head on. The bull case for Bitcoin, like from a price perspective, where do you think this thing can go? I mean, what are we? We're just above 30K right now. What's your bull case for Bitcoin?
Well, the bull case for Bitcoin is the failure of central banking and fiat currency. And that has a weird outcome because, we're very focused on the US dollar price of Bitcoin today. And we didn't get into this, but we maybe should have earlier. The other thing about money as a language of value is that it facilitates these economic nerve signals called prices. And prices are very important. They're probably more important than natural language in coordinating human action across time, right? Like your labor has a price, assets have a price. As you just said, number go up, which is Bitcoin price, US dollar price go up, is what draws in basically everyone. I think the price is the phenomenon or the instrument that commands the most attention in the world, right? Why is Elon Musk famous? Because of his price, his net worth, right? It's a very important metric when it comes to determining where we place our attention, right? Whether it's on an asset or an individual. So the bull case for Bitcoin, I guess somewhat unfortunately to say, in my opinion, is paved. You could say the path to hyper Bitcoinization is paved with a series of hyperinflations, fiat currency hyperinflations. And presumably the last of those would be the US dollar, because the US dollar is the most widely demanded fiat currency in the world today. There's 330 million people in the US, but there's about 4.5 billion users of dollars worldwide. There's an entire offshore derivative dollar market called the euro dollar system that is not controlled by the Federal Reserve, but drives a massive configuration of demand for the US dollar. This is basically a pyramid scheme on top of a pyramid scheme. It's very meta in that way. I think we'll see many weaker currencies collapse into stronger currencies over the decades to come. We've seen this already before, right? When Zimbabwe hyperinflates, what does the economy do? It dollarizes, right? They switch to a purchasing power stable fiat currency and switch out of a hyperinflating fiat currency. So I'd expect a lot of international fiat currencies to collapse into the US dollar over time. This somewhat parallels the dollar milkshake theory that Brett Johnson advocates very heavily for. I think it's just an expression of the universal demand for one money. Like, again, we had gold for a reason. The dollar was a derivative of gold, and the network effects that the dollar has today are basically an echo of that, right? It's an echo of its redeemability for gold at one point in history. So after we get enough currencies collapsed into the US dollar, we're probably left with just the US dollar or maybe a few other, you might have East coin and West coin. Maybe it's Chinese yuan and US dollar, the last two standing, who knows? But when they start to hyperinflate, things get really weird, right? Like the US dollar price of Bitcoin goes up and up and up. But eventually, when a currency's hyperinflating, first of all, it's not a straight line. It'll go up and bust, up and bust. You could study the price of gold during the Weimar hyperinflation. Gold is up 800%, it's down 80%. It's up 500%, it's down 92%. It's up 1100%, it's down 75%. Like, it's a very jagged path to hyperinflation. But at some point, like in the Weimar hyperinflation, like the Weimar, what was it? The Reichmark, I think was the name of their currency. Eventually the Reichmark price of gold is just meaningless, right? Like, it was a wheelbarrow of cash to buy like a slice of bread. Like, the money has lost its utility as a unit of account. And so I think we're going to reach that point with Bitcoin at some time, right? When the US dollar goes into hyperinflation, eventually the dollar price just won't mean anything. 5, 10, 15, 20, 100 million US dollars for a Bitcoin. And at some point, people are gonna be like, well, the price of bread in dollars is like tripling every few days. I can't use this thing to buy food or predictably buy food. Then this currency is no longer useful to me. But when I price bread in sats, it's actually going down stably over time, right? Or maybe it's stable in the short run and declining in the long run, something like that. So eventually there's this perspectival flip from I see the world in dollars to, well, dollars no longer work as a perceptual apparatus. I now see the world in sats or whatever, gold, whatever the thing is that the dollar is hyperinflating against. Presumably it would be gold and Bitcoin. That's going to be a weird time for people, right? That's going to be a weird time that this monetary protocol reset drives a psychological perceptual reset. I don't think people are ready for that. So when you ask me, like, what's the bull case in terms of dollar price? I think the bull case is the dollar price becomes meaningless and we reset all pricing in terms of sats. And that's a radical thing to say. So
yeah, because it's radical because it kind of breaks people's understandings. They're not really prepared to hear that their foundation that their entire life is built on is going to completely collapse.
yes.
But I would also say, I would implore any Bankless listener who just listened to that and is feeling resistance towards accepting that, to go check out the Wikipedia article about the collapse of fiat currencies, because it actually appears to be the status quo rather than the it is
Given enough
it is
time.
not given enough time in the fullness of time. Well, the typical fiat currency, I think the average lifespan is 29 years or something
really?
like this. I think the United States dollar is an exception because of the centrality of the whole world based on it, the petrodollar. But the base case is that fiat currencies do inflate. It's just a matter of how violently and how rapidly. And so, Robert, that's the Bitcoin versus fiat coin conversation. Yet Bitcoin also spawned this massive world of cryptocurrencies. And so how does what's the Bitcoin articulation of its own inherent bull case versus the long tail of crypto assets, for example?
Yeah, I would encourage people, as I was telling you guys offline, I think the operative word to distinguish between Bitcoin and all other crypto assets is decentralization. And it's not a binary. It's not, this is decentralized, that is not. However, if I'm forced to simplify the crypto asset universe, I say Bitcoin is decentralized, in my opinion. Everything else is not, or not enough, not decentralized enough, let's say. I would encourage people to go read Balaji's piece from 2017. It's titled Quantifying Decentralization. I think it's in the Coinbase blog. And he basically put together something that was inspired by the Gini coefficient and the Lorenz curve. I think he called it the Nakamoto coefficient, to try and quantify the decentralization of crypto assets. And he's looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum in particular. I don't agree with all of the subsystems he looks at. He looks at like exchanges. I don't think that actually matters. Like exchanges aren't part of the Bitcoin protocol. I don't think ownership concentration matters that much. A lot of people get up in arms about that one, but I think ownership concentration doesn't compromise the decentralization of an asset. But arbitrary rule changes, concentration of the consensus protocol or mining network, all of these things can compromise decentralization. And I basically view money as like a winner take all or winner take most marketplace. I think Bitcoin has a very unique first mover advantage and the benefit of path dependence, that it was the first crypto asset. It was able to grow in a world where awareness of crypto assets was almost nil, right? It was kind of the original trailblazer. And that afforded it this situation where it could really develop its decentralization naturally. It's the most organically grown crypto asset, you might say. And when you put all those things together, I really tried to crystallize my thoughts in the piece that I wrote, The Number Zero in Bitcoin, on this topic. I can't summarize it all now. It's like a 40-minute essay, but I did my best to describe why Bitcoin is, in my opinion, different than all other crypto assets, and the same reason the number zero is different than all other numbers. And there's an interesting history there. Even if you're not into Bitcoin, you could just read about the number zero. It's a very radical innovation. And a good example of an unstoppable idea. Like, it was just so useful. No one could stop it. Like, governments tried to outlaw it. It was, the church didn't like it. It sort of undermined the propagandistic power base of the church because it implied infinity. But the church's story about the world was based on a finite universe, and it's a whole thing. It's really, really interesting.
I love the concept of a church trying to ban a number.
Yeah. It's funny, we can laugh at that today, right? Because heads were rolling at one point about that, literally.
So Robert, let me ask you the question. Do you own any other crypto assets besides Bitcoin?
I don't. The only shit coin that I own is US dollars. And I'm not proud of that, but
well, do you agree that other crypto assets are in a monetary competition with Bitcoin, though? You just think that Bitcoin happens to be the power law winner of that, but you would concede that other crypto assets are competing with Bitcoin as money on those dimensions that we were talking about earlier.
I think monetary, competition among monetary technologies is always alive. I don't think that ever goes away, as we described earlier, right? People are experimenting with different tools for the job. And really, any place two people come together and agree to trade favors, you could say those favors are money, right? It's like a deferred favor, basically, right? Like, hey, I owe you one. That's kind of a form of money, right? It's a medium of exchange, even if it's just between a tiny network, like two people. So monetary competition is alive and well at all times. My view would be that Bitcoin has basically perfected the design space of money. Like, it's perfectly divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, and it's fixed supply. So it's perfectly scarce. I don't think there's any room in the design space left to introduce something that is disruptive to Bitcoin. I kind of view Bitcoin as an ideal money, or even the invention of pure money. This is something we didn't touch on, but the market cap of gold, approximately 20% of that is for gold as an industrial metal, right? Use in computers, dentistry, etc. The other 80% is demand for gold as a money, as a store of value. Bitcoin's the first asset that 100% of its market cap is as money, right? It's a pure money. It doesn't have an industrial use. You can't put Bitcoin in your teeth or use it as a computer component. It's not an industrial metal. It's just a pure monetary technology. And I guess I'm further convicted in that view because even if I'm wrong, Bitcoin is still open source software. Mm-hmm. So say Ethereum or any other coin for that matter established some product market fit, right? Some other unforeseen monetary property that's really useful. Well, that doesn't mean it can't be imported into the Bitcoin UTXO set. So Bitcoin retains this capacity for useful adaptation, while at the same time having basically perfected the design space for money. So I think it's very resilient to disruption. And that's just my view. Views are subject to change, I guess, but that's where I've been for the past several years. And I don't see anything that's shaken my conviction yet.
You basically think that they're in the kind of the monetary space, Bitcoin sort of got it right. And so if it got it right, then there's not a lot of room for competitors.
To continue leveling up your crypto game, then you need to get on the Bankless newsletter. It's the world's most popular crypto email and is completely free. Just click below to sign up.